Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd listened a little bit more often to that inner voice that urged you to go and have that crazy adventure?
It's the freedom to go where we want, when we want, not have baggage or burdens. You know, it's a 50-foot boat, so it's a decent size, but that's all we've got. We sold our houses on the mainland, so we don't have to worry about houses and properties. We don't have to worry about other family members. It's just us. We don't have stuff that we're carrying around that burdens you down.
And how taking that adventure might impact how you show up in normal life afterwards.
Rather than a new insight, maybe it's a reinforcing of something which I know deep down. And for me, curiosity is everything. Curiosity throws a light on the world. And without curiosity, you can't learn and grow. You can't learn from the experience of others. And I think that this podcast is perhaps about fertilising curiosity.
We've all got an inner pioneering spirit that deserves to be honoured. And I reckon it's by honouring it that we can learn to lead more authentically. Today, we're digging deep with a guest who's going to show us how to do that. Hi, I'm Digby Scott, and this is Dig Deeper, a podcast where I have conversations with depth that'll change the way you lead. My guest today is Andrew Maffett. Who's Andrew? He's a man of many layers. On the outside, you could describe him as a relentless adventurer. For example, he won the Australian Geographic Adventure of the Year Award in 2015 by kayaking around the subantarctic South Georgia Island. I want to say at the age of 50. He's kayaked down the Grand Canyon and he came second place in one of the world's longest running multi-sports events, the iconic 243-kilometre coast to coast in New Zealand. This man has been out there. But beyond that, you could also describe him as a lifelong learner who isn't afraid to reinvent himself and has truly discovered his own way of leading in life. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Andrew for some 25 years. I've grown to admire how he continually asks and answers the question about how he wants to lead his life and make the most of his time on the planet. And being a good Aussie, we've got to shorten his surname and put either an I or an O on the end of it. In this case, it's an O, so he's known to his friends as Maffo. Maffo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Digby. Great to be here.
So just describe where you are right now.
Well, Digby, I'm living a life on the sea. I'm living on my 14.5 metre, 50-foot sailing yacht. We're anchored off the north coast of an island called Busuanga in the Philippines. So we've got beautiful blue water all around us, coral reefs. There's actually quite a cute little resort on the beach just to the side of us. So it's absolutely beautiful. This morning, my routine is I get up in the morning and go for a paddle. I've got a couple of kayaks on the boat. And this morning I went for a paddle around our bay and went past a little village where there's probably 10 or 20 houses. And I heard these people calling out and saying, "Oh, come here." So I went over and said hello and pulled up on the beach. And anyway, as soon as I get there, one of them shoots up this coconut palm and knocks down half a dozen coconuts. And there I am having coconuts on the beach with this family. And, so that's my life at the moment, is cruising from island to island through Southeast Asia, hanging out with the locals, going snorkeling, going spearfishing, going kayaking. It's a pretty good way to live my life.
So it's a pretty good way to live your life. I think that's the understatement of the day here. If there was a word to describe how your life is right now, what do you reckon that would be?
Oh, I think freedom. You know, it's the freedom to go where we want, when we want, not have baggage or burdens. It's a 50-foot boat, so it's a decent size, but that's all we've got. You know, we sold our houses on the mainland, so we don't have to worry about houses and properties. We don't have to worry about other family members. It's just us. We don't have stuff that we're carrying around that burdens you down. So no, it's free. It's free to go where we want. We have free to spend as long as we want with, if we see some locals on the beach, we can spend 10 minutes with them or a day. And that tends to bring some wonderful experiences into your life.
I really want to dig into this idea of freedom, right? Because I think for the listeners, that's something that would be a common aspiration is freedom. And I reckon the whole time I've known you, that would be a word that not necessarily that you've been free in time the whole time, but I think there's a free spiritedness that you bring. And I want to I want to take us back a little bit, actually, to 1986. And you were in Victoria, I think. You were, if my understanding serves me correctly, just finishing uni. And I want to read a quote from a magazine called The Mountaineer. And the article is called, "You Can't Lead Your Life in a Plastic Bubble." Rumours were rife in the weeks preceding our trip to Shoalhaven River in the southeast New South Wales. Was it really harder than the Indy? Why was this section classed uncanoeable? Could you take beginners if the level was low? The four of us, Timmy, Ian, Andrew, and myself, this is the author, I think his name was Dave, were on an adventure to find out. Now, when I came across that, Maffo, I thought 1986, that's quite a few years ago, yet there's something in you being a part of an adventure there that I'm thinking is still true today. There's like a seed of something that was there then, as I reckon is still growing and flourishing right now. What would you say that was about at the time? What was that seed that was coming to life then? What was all that about?
Well, you dug back into the archives to find that story. That was actually a story about paddling the Shoalhaven River in southern New South Wales. That this particular section had never been paddled before, and that article was written by a friend who's still a mate of mine, Dave Walker. And so we went to see if it could, in actual fact, be paddled, which it turns out it could. So we're the first people to paddle that. But I think back then the sea was camaraderie, with the people that we were sharing the adventure with. It was always good fun. You felt like people had your back. You could take some risks because there were some other very competent people there. If you got in trouble, could to pick up the pieces. I think it was the excitement of doing something novel. It didn't have to be something that had never been done by anybody before, but it was generally about doing things that I hadn't done before or we hadn't done before. So, the excitement of doing something new and seeing whether we could handle it, and not always, massively demanding, not always death-defying. Oftentimes just a new experience to see what this part of the world looks like, or how we respond to that. So I think, I was really fortunate that club was actually the Melbourne University Mountaineering Club, and that was super formative for me in terms of my passion for outdoor pursuits. And it was a sort of club where you'd come along, and the people more senior in the club would teach the more junior people. There were no professional instructors, and we'd just get out there and learn on the river or on the mountains or on the rock face or whatever we were doing on that occasion. And that gave me a real passion and taste for outdoor pursuits, that it didn't have to be overly structured. It didn't have to be bound up by rules. It could be something that was free and joyous and a shared experience. And so I think that was really significant for me in my outdoor pursuits, but probably beyond that too. And people talk about rock climbing as being a metaphor for life. That there's typically, if it's a challenging rock face, there's probably only one set of manoeuvres to get up there, and you don't necessarily find that set of manoeuvres initially, and sometimes you have to have many goes at it to get your sequence of moves right, and sometimes in the middle of it, the most challenging part, you have to be the most creative, because that's where you need to find a set of moves which you probably don't instinctively think it's going to get you up the rock face. And I think probably those outdoor pursuits have guided me outside of my life of adventure as well.
I reckon I'm wondering about how that's showing up today, the version of you that's in the Philippines right now. What are the echoes of that in terms of how you make choices, how you choose to live every day or the next 6 months or whatever it might be?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because so there's only two of us on this boat. There's my wife Donna and I, and Donna's not a very experienced sailor. She's very competent in her own right, but in a sort of fairly limited way. And she does get quite freaked out, if the conditions get rough or if we end up in a tight anchorage. And so we have this saying on the boat: what would a conservative person do in this situation? Because my instinct is not always to do the most conservative thing. My instinct is often to do what looks the most exciting or the most novel. And when your life is on a boat, I mean, literally everything. Our whole life is on here. Everything that we own and everything that we live for is here. This is our home. And Donna's, my loving partner, and she's, I don't want her to come to any harm, and I don't want her to get freaked out, because if she gets too freaked out, she probably won't want to sail with me anymore. So in actual fact, the life that we live now looks from the outside really adventurous, and there are times that it is, but actually we try and make conservative decisions. So, we go wider around a cape, rather than cut it short around a cape. And we try and find an anchorage that's a little bit further offshore. So if the anchor drags, we're not going to end up on the shore too quickly. So look, it feels more like a life of freedom than it does of hardcore adventure. There are exceptions. A couple of days ago, we were at another place in the Philippines called Coron, and people who are divers will know Coron because it's very well known for its wreck diving on Japanese wrecks. And so there's this amazing limestone karst formations where cliffs come out of the water, maybe a couple hundred meters high, and surrounded by reefs. And anyways, there's this tiny little anchorage that's maybe, 100 meters by 100 meters, maybe not even that big, surrounded only a tiny little gap you can get into it. So I'd said, look, we want to go and anchor in there. That'll be pretty cute. And Donna's gone, I don't want to go there. And it'll be fine, darling. So she drives the big boat around out in the water. I take the dinghy in and suss it out. And we go in there, and you've got to tie in ropes bow and stern so we don't run into the reef. And we just couldn't get the boat to set. It took us 2 or 3 hours. The boat was drifting towards the reef, and then I'd haul it off, and the wind would change direction, and we'd be pushing onto the reef again. And I'm literally 3 or 4 meters away from the reef, and pulling it away again. But it's you go through that, and then you get the boat settled, and the wind calms down, and you are just in this place of magic. The birds are calling from the cliffs, and the sunlight, the sunset is reflecting off the water, and it is just absolute magic. And I think lots of my pursuits, you go through these points of terror or of being freaked out, and it takes very little to turn a corner where all of a sudden you're not terrified, or you're not in peril, or you're not feeling like you're in danger, and you get around the corner and you go, oh geez, I feel fantastic. I've always had that at some point in some way, and it's sometimes hard to remember in that moment of terror, or when you really is a massive demand on you to resolve something, and then you come around a corner, the wind changes direction, all of a sudden you're in a sheltered bay, and it's not that you forget how hard it was. I don't think that's happened. People say you forget it, but you don't. You're still jittery with it, but it's like, wow, this place looks even more beautiful because I've been through that drama to get here.
Yeah, it's like you've got to earn your nirvana, right? That's kind of what I'm hearing. There's no easy earning to get to the next level of freedom or whatever it might be.
But it can also come really quickly. Like this is the thing. Like it's not something that you have to sit under a rock for half a life to find nirvana. Sometimes you just got to get through that storm, turn a corner, and minutes later you're in the sheltered lagoon. So it's something. Yes, it feels brighter and more beautiful because you've been through that challenge.
There you
go. But so you earn it in that sense. It would still be beautiful regardless, but it's more beautiful because you've been through the hardship. But you can also get to that very quickly. It's not like, I've got to do a lifetime of this before I get a payback. I
love that. It makes me think of a place you and I have both shared time in it, in the northwest of Western Australia, where, we go windsurfing and surfing and stuff. I've been going for probably as long as I've known you actually, Maff, it's 25 odd years. And I've often thought, it's not a comfortable place to be, and you got to take everything with you, and you've got to drive 1,000 kilometers, and then you've got to set up camp, and you got to make sure you got all your own water and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got to go out into these waves that there's sharks and there's whales and there's coral reef and all of this. And I've often wondered, why do I love going back? And I think it's because of that. It's the willing to go through the discomfort to get to something that's incredibly special on the other side. And it makes me wonder about, how do we all learn to do that? How do we, what do we need someone else to model it? Do we need to be in, a mountaineering club or whatever it might be, surround ourselves by other people? What's the thing that helps us move into that space of discomfort, do you reckon?
Well, I think it's about, in many cases, not requiring comfort. So I think that our lives are very comfortable, and that people will say, I don't want to go camping, I'll stay in a hotel because it's not very comfortable. Well, the truth is camping can be comfortable, but no, it's never going to be as comfortable as your bed at home. It's never going to be as comfortable as a hotel. And I think that you've got to, people talk about comfort zone. It's a cliche, but it's about going outside of what is actually comfortable. And Nalu, which is where you're talking about in Western Australia, is austere. It's harsh. It's dry. It's windy. There are flies. It's harsh, but it's there's on the edge of that is immense beauty that you don't get to experience if you're not prepared to drive 1,000 kilometres through pretty open country, and then be in some sort of camping environment. So I think that that's a big part of it. But I think that people also, and this is a theme I think about a lot these days, is people are too busy to give themselves a chance to go and find those places of peace and beauty, because you can't do it in an afternoon. You can't do it in the couple of hour coffee catch up. It's actually something which takes more time than that. And I think a lot of people don't give themselves the time because their lives are so busy.
Let's dig into that, Maff, because, I've written a lot about and thought a lot about, as you have, this idea of unhurried. And I remember probably the last time we caught up in person was in Fremantle, or just north of Fremantle in Perth. And you'd been away for maybe 2 years or 18 months or something from Perth. And it was one of the first times I think you'd come back to, I guess, in quotes, civilization. And I remember asking you the question, what do you notice about the difference between the life you're living and what you see around you here in Perth? Do you remember what you said to me?
Well, it's probably that people are so busy. Their lives are so busy. And it goes beyond that. There's an expectation that you're going to be busy. When people say to each other, how are you going? People say, busy. Or you might say, how are you going? Busy? Because there's this expectation that you're going to be busy. And then if you're not busy, you're letting the team down. You're not pulling your weight. And so people just fill their lives. And I think that, I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah. Let me remind you, I agree 100%. Let me remind you of what you said. You said, it seems that everyone has got somewhere to be next.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that hit me between the eyes. It was like, yes, you've just nailed it with that quote, that statement, that I've scheduled my day and I've got this and then I've got to be this and then I've got to there and I've got 1 hour for you, Maffo, and then I've got to go and put my time somewhere else, right? And I remember that stark observation. And, we've talked a lot about the cost of that. Well, actually, maybe we haven't. Maybe we need to dig into that a little bit more. What is the cost? Because we must be missing something by driving for productivity every day, right? Making stuff happen. What do you reckon the cost is?
Well, I think that the immediate impact is people are not present. So because in their mind they know where they need to be next. They've always got to be somewhere else other than where they are. And there are some people that can still themselves and say, right, well, I've got an hour with this person, I'm going to be very present. But then you get distracted by a phone ringing or social media or something like that, and again you get hauled away from being present. But I think this thing about being busy and filling every moment doesn't allow you to bring in a range of experiences and insights which would otherwise be available to you. In my experience, having quiet, still, or empty times creates a vacuum that brings in opportunity, attracts opportunities and attracts insights that you never get when you're busy, because you're always focused on what you got to do right now, what you got to do next. And if you can actually still things, it's hard to convince someone of that who is caught up in this, caught up in this world of being busy. But the actual fact, you're going to get better ideas, you're going to get better experiences by stopping and doing nothing, and that's sort of counterintuitive to the current Western modern society. But that's absolutely been my experience.
Yeah, I love the way you talk about new insights that you wouldn't see otherwise. I think of the metaphor of a snow globe, those globes that you can shake up and all the snowflakes are, then that if you stop it and then the snowflakes just settle. And I think that's a bit like our minds when we allow ourselves to stop. It's interesting. Whenever I ask leaders, in corporate environments, I don't use the word empty times, but it's essentially that. When you've got when you stop and you're not doing anything, what's that like? And the word that comes up most often is boring.
Oh, yeah.
And and that's seen as a negative thing. I remember listening to a podcast, I think it was with Tim Ferriss and a coach called Jerry Connolly. And Jerry was talking about this idea of stirring the oatmeal, that you need these times where you're not really doing much besides something really mundane, but those times are when you can get the most profound insights from just stirring the oatmeal. Yet what I'm hearing you say is we both observe this. That's a bad thing, and we need to be achieving something else next quite quickly, right? Whereas, I think we have you are 10 hours behind the wheel.
I think people in modern Western society have a social contract with the economy or with the society, and it says, "Look, I agree to be productive, and being productive means being busy. I'm going to be productive in my work. I'm going to be busy in my family life. I'm going to have a social life where I don't miss out on things. And the contract is that in return, the society will make you comfortable. Will give you enough income and enough to meet your needs, and your kids will be busy, and your kids will go on and have better lives than what you've had. But I actually think that contract's breaking down. I think that contract is, maybe some time ago it was a fair contract, but it's not a fair contract now. I think that what people give up, the beauty that could be in their lives, and the creativity that could be in their lives from being busy and seeking comfort, rather than seeking something out beyond that. I think that contract's falling apart for a lot of people.
What do you notice in your current context, sailing around Southeast Asia? Because I'm imagining that there's a different rhythm and a different contract that's in place, right? How would you sum that up?
Oh, look, this is crazy. We've spent the last 2 years sailing around Southeast Asia. We spent a year in Indonesia. We've just finished 6 months in Borneo. We're in the Philippines now. And in that time, we very rarely end up in large cities. Sometimes it might be, 10, 20,000 people, but mostly it's way less than 1,000 people. It might be villages we go to, mostly are probably, less than 100 or around 100 people. Like I was talking about the village this morning, had 20 houses in it. And that's their total life. And you go to these villages, and we do this every day. Every day we get off the boat and we go exploring and talk to these people, engage with them. And we think what we can give them is our time. And we don't want to give them stuff. They don't really need stuff most of the time, but we give them our time and engage with them and with their kids. And they are not busy. These people, they do enough fishing to catch enough fish to eat for dinner. They tend their gardens. But most of the time what you observe is they're sitting around, and they're in really basic houses, like literally thatch huts, like thatch walls, thatch roofs, often no walls, just raised sleeping platforms with a basic cooker or a little fire in the corner. And that's how they live. And, are they happier or healthier than us in the Western society? I don't know. I don't spend enough time with them to make an assessment of that. But what I do observe is there's a lot of people, a vast percentage of the world's population that are not caught up in being busy. And these people, they have time for doing art. They have time for making music. They have time for a community, with their neighbours. And they're happy to see us. They're happy people. They're multi-generational. There's always an older person there as well as kids. So they're living in multi-generational. If they're not in the same house, they're certainly in the same community, living co-joined lives. So, it really makes you question. And, you look at kids now, kids are so busy. They're being run from dance lessons to birthday parties, and backwards and forwards. And every moment is filled with some sort of activity that's going to help them have a bit happier, fuller lives, is what we're told. But, these kids we meet, they make their own musical instruments. They'll get an old bike tube with a bit of fencing wire and roll that down the street, and that's their entertainment. And they are entertaining themselves. The kids, who might be 4 or 5 or 6, are out in a baby canoe with a little fishing line catching fish. Just a couple of days ago, we went to this little island, Tara Island, and there were these 6 kids inside of a plastic tub. It was a really hot day, and someone had put a bit of water in this, and they were having the time of their lives. So they were all just splashing around in this tiny tub that's, less than a metre across. We keep walking, and then there's this girl who catches up with us, and she's got to be, we reckon, 3. So she was one of the kids playing around in this tub. Now she's walking from one side of the village completely to the other by herself, back to her family home. And we're thinking, oh, she's just been to the pool at the friend's place. but how many 3-year-old kids would be allowed to, wander from one side of the village to the other in absolute safety? So, it's very much of a different way to live, and they mostly have education. These kids, there are schools there, and mostly they get healthcare. Like there is some healthcare available. So they're getting their basic needs met. They're typically. Sometimes we get asked for food. We generally, if we get asked, we'll give food. But mostly we're not, which means they're either too proud or they actually have got enough to get by. So I think these families are getting by, but they're comfortable to a degree, but they're definitely not busy.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. We had the question, what do they have that we don't? I mean, a simple answer might be time, but I think beyond that, it sounds like there's something about the depth of relationships, the depth of experiencing things you talked about earlier around not being present, something about the quality of experience that comes from being present, that comes to the top of mind for me with that.
Yeah, look, it's hard. It's very hard to, as a visitor, who comes and goes in their lives, to know how much that's true. You can only guess at what their experience is. But from the outside, it looks boring. To pick up the words you were saying, from the outside, you'd say, "Man, what a boring life they've got." But what is boring? Is boring. And is boring. The one guy was making his own fishing lures. I go to a shop and I spend $35 buying a fishing lure, and this guy was making one, almost exactly the same. So how much satisfaction is there in making your own fishing lure, catching the fish to feed your family, rather than working hard, spending the money, going to the shop, in a car to buy the lure, then go catch the fish. So there's a different way of experiencing the world, that perhaps is richer, perhaps is more authentic, than what we get to experience.
Well, to ground it in maybe more of a Western world context, I'm a big proponent of the idea of having an unhurried project at all times. So for me, I build guitars, and, on average, every 3 to 4 months, I'm starting a new guitar project, and it takes that long to build a guitar. And I could go into the local music shop and buy one, and it'll probably be better quality and probably sound better, costs me a lot more money. Yet there's something about what you just said, the sense of satisfaction. I think that we all really yearn for beyond, just buying something. There's something about, again, earning your way into nirvana. Maybe it's not as grandiose as that, right? But there's something about doing the work to get an outcome is more satisfying than just going and having a transactional experience. It's a bit like being a tourist, isn't it? Like you show up and just pay to go and see, I don't know, crocodiles being fed or whatever it is, as an example, versus going and finding your own way to get a sense of learning and satisfaction. There's some real parallels there. You know what? I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, because we've been talking about being unhurried, and I want to just rewind back a bit, Maffett, because when we met, I would not have described you as unhurried. So you were, it would have been about 1999, and you were running a outdoor adventure training company called Marybrook. And I remember meeting you, and I was at an inflection point in my own career. And I was looking to do something completely different, and you hired me as a contract kind of outdoor adventure trainer. And you were instrumental in shaping my direction. And I want to just acknowledge that on here now, right? There was something about how you led, how you helped me find a voice that I was looking to express, and some talents that I wanted to, explore to see whether I was any good at this stuff, facilitation particularly. But you weren't unhurried. You seemed to be, at least on the surface, a very, very busy person. Can you just tell us a bit about your life back then? What was going on for you, and particularly around how you thought about leadership?
Yeah, well, look, I had a hugely busy professional life. Like I'm no guru around this being unhurried. And when Donna and I started sailing 3 years ago, she also had her own business for 20 years and employed many, many people, and was also extremely busy. And we actually had to consciously deprogram ourselves. We had to come up with practices that would slow us down, that would help us create space.
Tell us about those. What are some of those? Because that might be useful.
So when you're sailing, you have a one-night anchorage, which is safe and secure enough, but not pretty. So, you stop for the night. Because when you're sailing, you don't sail through the night. Typically, you sail through the day and find somewhere to stop for the evening or the afternoon, and you head off again the next morning. So you have one-night anchorages. And then you have two-night anchorages, which are pretty nice. They're good enough to spend a second night there. So there must be some good snorkeling, or maybe there's an interesting village or a mountain to climb or something like that. So we decided that if an anchorage is good enough for 2 nights, we're going to stay for 3. So we put a practice in there, and we said, okay, we're going to stay for a minimum of 3, because we've got time. Like we're not short on time. We don't have deadlines. We can go wherever we want, whenever we want. So, and what we started to experience was that if you stay that extra day, on that third day, the weather might glass off, and you'll get this incredible day for snorkeling that wasn't there on the first or the second day. Or on the third day, the villagers will now be confident enough that, you're not just coming and going. So they'll come out in their dugout dinghy to serve you coconuts, and you end up giving them some fishing lures, and you go ashore and have a barbecue with them. So that wouldn't have happened in the second day. So you find that by creating extra space, you start attracting these experiences which you wouldn't have had if you were rushing through. And coming out of our professional lives, we would have started out saying, well, we've got to get from here to there. That's 200 miles, and we're going to do 50 miles a day. That's 4 days. And we'll stop here, and here, and we'll keep going. And if the weather gets strong, we'll reduce the sail, and that'll all be okay. And because you can do that. And that's the manager's way of doing it. That's, when you've had a busy professional life and you're trying to squeeze as much in, that's how you do life. And so we had to really consciously stop ourselves from doing that. We had an option to put Starlink on the boat. So that's, this is the Elon Musk, satellite internet system. So we made a conscious decision not to do that. It's actually not that expensive, and it really works well up here. But we said, we actually don't want to be connected, and we can get phone reception frequently, pretty often, really. But we went through the Kimberley in northern Australia. We went 10 weeks from Broome to Darwin, 10 weeks, no shops, no roads, no towns, no internet for 10 weeks. And it was hard. Like Donna really struggled with not having connection for 10 weeks. And I said to her, look, you'll never have this again. These parts of the world that in 10 years' time, they won't exist. You'll never get to have 10 weeks totally disconnected again, in a place of raw beauty and a place of
great reframe.
So in huge spiritual Aboriginal history there that just permeates out of the rock. You just feel it when you go ashore, and you get that by doing that disconnect. So we've had to, but that wouldn't have been what we would have done as a professional. You would have paid the money, put Starlink on the boat, high speed internet, day and night, connected to social media, connected to I need it because we need it for the weather. We've got to know what weather's coming. No one can forecast weather up there. And if the weather's coming, you just deal with it anyway. But you can find excuses and reasons to bring yourself back to that world. So, that's a long way round from saying I looked busy back in those days of Marybrook because I was busy, and I was fried. And I couldn't sleep at night because my mind was buzzing with all the things I had to do, and and I was stressed about how every month I was going to pay the wages, and it was a busy time, and I tried to maintain my outdoor adventure pursuits, but they largely fell away because I didn't have time. Because I was running this business that was hugely rewarding. Like, we did amazing work, and I learned a lot. And I worked with some incredible people like yourself, Diggers. Like, there are plenty of people from that era of my life I'm still mates with now, and I'm so proud to see what those people have gone on to do in their lives. And so many of them are doing really amazing things, and I'm really stoked that in some way I might have been a stepping stone to help people live rich and fulfilled lives. So it's not bad being busy. Like, it actually achieved a lot of good things for me personally. I made a good bit of money out of it. So I learnt a lot, but what was the cost, from that? And that's what I reflect upon. Could I have done that in a different way?
Well, how would you answer that? What was the cost, and could you have done it differently?
Well, so I was married at the time to Lady Jennifer, beautiful wife. And so she always said to me, why are you so busy? And I'd say, because I've got to be busy, I've got to grow the business, and I've got to pay the wages, and, it's really important. The work we're doing, it's changing people's lives. It's really important. I've got to be busy. And she'd go, I know that, but you're missing out. Like, we've got this other part of our lives that you're not experiencing. And she'd go off to see music shows that I couldn't go to. I couldn't commit because I wouldn't really know where I'd be next week, whether I'd be busy with a client or not. And so she accepted that, and she said, well, that's my journey. That's what Andrew needs to do for whatever reason. And she went and did her thing, and we had a very happy life together, but we also had different aspects to our lives. Anyway, so Jen, fast forward a period from Marybrook, 13 years ago, Jen died of cancer. And she had she'd been unwell for some time, but the cancer came when within 3 months it was diagnosed, and then she was dead. And, and I tell you, that's a really good way of shaking up your reality around how important it is to be busy. And and I got it, the day after she died, I actually got it, what she'd been telling me. We'd been together for 23 years. And of course, I understood what she was saying intellectually. By working too hard, by working so much, you miss out on other stuff. You sort of understand that. I'm a smart enough person to get that. But emotionally, the day after she died, it just hit me like a rock. It's a bit like, God, now I get what's really important. It's actually relationships and the impact you have on other people that is the really important thing. And I don't have any regrets at all. I did all those things for the right reasons, and I had a really wonderful time having a professional life as I did. But from that point on, I got, oh man, I don't need to be busy. And I consciously, again, I spent a year, when I pretty much didn't work. I mean, I did bits and pieces of consulting, but not a lot, and I'd sit at home, no television on, no radio on, not reading a book, just contemplating, allowing this grief to work its way through. And, and since then I've been on a different trajectory around how important it is to be busy.
Yeah, I have a question that came up as you were talking about that. The classic question might be, what do you wish you'd done differently? But I don't know whether that's that useful, because it seems to be that you had to live through that to really savor the lesson and get the lesson at beyond an intellectual level. So I'm wondering about, if you were to see someone who was your age now, as you were back then, early 30s or mid 30s or whatever it might have been, how might you guide them?
Wow. See, that's such a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think that I would. My advice, if someone gave me this advice at the time, I wouldn't have heard it. But the
Yes,
advice
exactly.
that I needed to take account of was chill out a bit. Everything's going to be okay. So I had a sense that I needed to manage things towards an outcome that I wanted, and so that drove me to be busy. It drove to be stressed. It drove me to worry. Gave me anxiety. But don't worry so much. It's actually going to work out. And if you make there's a way of doing this that I've come to understand as I've got older, is how to know when to make the big decisions, and in between the big decisions, just let it roll. Just let it roll. Let find a pattern, find a groove, do your work, do your family, do your life in a way that's stimulating, but has a level of ease, and then. When it comes time to make a big decision, that's when you need to be on your game and make your focus. I think that would be the advice that I would have most benefited from. But no one could have told me that. I wouldn't have heard it, which is a bit ironic. And and I see a lot of people like that now. I've got two brothers who are deeply involved in professional lives and young families, and so busy, and Donna's families are the same. So I see a lot of people that don't have the ability to hear that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I've often wondered about how do we accelerate wisdom, and it's because the wiser we are, the better choices we can make, and the better we can serve the world potentially, right? But so for me, I had a similar age, 30, national manager here in New Zealand, running 2 offices, flying between 2 cities every week, burned out big time, took me 5 years to recover from that, my confidence and all of that stuff, right? And there was something, I remember giving my first ever Toastmasters speech after that, and it was all about define what success means to you. And that, I hadn't really defined success, but at the same time, I had to live through it to get that lesson. And it was a horrible thing to have to live through, but again, earn your nirvana, right? There's something about how do you have to go through the big, massive, almost life-breaking thing to learn those lessons. And I love your advice. I love this idea of, everything's going to be okay. And also let things roll, like just let things unfold a bit. And I try to do that more and more these days, but at the same time, before we came online, we were talking about the idea of inflection points, right? There's this idea that you need to be able to recognize when is the time to put the foot down or to move or to pivot or whatever. Tell us a bit about how you think about those moments.
Well, look, people look at my professional life and my personal life and say, wow, you've done so many amazing, interesting things. How did you do that? How did you end up? I mean, I worked in search and rescue, jumping out of aircraft deep into the ocean to save people. I ran an adventure training company. I ran a global company doing search and rescue training and counter-terrorism work. I mean, I've done some what people would say, wow, that's really interesting sort of work. And how did you do that? And I think, for me, it's actually understanding what's important to me in my work life. Like what are the things which that I get value from? So I want something to be interesting. It has to be intrinsically interesting. It has to be fun. I want it to be exciting. I want it to be. I don't want it to be predictable. I want it to be something that brings in novel, and I want it to be fulfilling. And have a sense of achievement or that I'm contributing in some way. I mean, these are some things which for me, and that's just not just my professional life, it's in my personal life too. These are the things that are important to me. So if you've got these 2 or 5 different indicators, so when they're all in the red zone, or if the majority of them in the red zone, you go, hang on, maybe what I'm doing right now is not what it was 2 years ago, or however long ago it was when I last did a check-in, and things were looking pretty good then. I had four out of 5 are in the green. That's great. Now I've got 4 out of 5 in the red. So it's a time then to say what else is out there. What else is actually going to give me these things that I want in my professional life. And the great thing about work, it's not so true in your family, but if you don't like your job, go and change it. If you're running your own business and you don't like it, change the business or get rid of the business and start again. Like this is not that hard. You're not actually bolted on to what you're doing. If you've got you've got family and kids, bit harder to do that. If you've got elderly parents who need care, bit harder to do that. But in your work life, you definitely can. The only person to blame if you're not enjoying and being fulfilled by what you're doing is you. So do something about it. And so this then comes back to that what we were talking about before about creating space. And I think this is the time is to, like, when you're seeing all this stuff, is to back off, create space, find a way to slow down and to see what will come. And the business that you were previously talking about, Marybrook, when we were running the team building and leadership training. So I owned that for 10 years, and then I knew it had come to an end. I was 3 out of 5 in the red. It was time to move on, and I'd always planned to sell the business, so put it on the market. Can I just pause you there, Maffett, because I want to know, and I reckon our listeners want to know, how do you know when to check your indicators? Like, because it's good, it's easy enough to say I value novelty and I value, something where I'm fascinated with it, etc. But you can just be head down, going barreling along, focused on goal achievement, hitting revenue targets or KPIs or whatever, and not remembering to look at, am I actually enjoying this, right? And I'm wondering, what's your pull-up mechanism, to go, hang on, is this the right track? How do you know when to stop or at least to check? Yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, these are things that I'm continually and intuitively aware of. They're not things that I need to stop and make a check of. That's, I guess, I've always had high expectations of what I was going to achieve and experience in my life, and if I'm not achieving those, that feedback loop comes back to me pretty quickly. So for me, it's never required a conscious stop. But there are other measures. I mean, health, health are great markers. I was in one role, and I've always exercised, and I looked at myself, I'm fat. How do I get fat? I never had a car tie around my tummy. What happened? And I realised I'd started this new job, and that was hugely stressful and demanding and difficult. And and 6 months in, I thought, bloody hell, this isn't going right. So that was, that for me was a wake up. Like, hang on, got to start doing some things differently here. I think what I see in you is someone there's this paradoxical thing going on, right? If you look at your CV, it's not linear in any way, right? You could say there's always going to be a narrative and a thread running through it. There's this almost opportunistic, here's where I'm going to go next. I'm going to go Africa now. I'm going to be connected to Africa for 9 years. There's all of these different kind of almost spontaneous sort of decisions, which I don't think they were. Yet at the same time, the other side of that paradox is there's a methodology that you're very methodical around learning to step back and go, all right, I need to reassess and reinvent now. And I really admire that. And I think that's what I'm curious about, is this kind of deliberateness to go, hang on, where am I going next? Is this the right track? And how you tune into that. Because I know for me personally, I reckon if I had that built in as a deliberate approach to life and did it a bit more often, I reckon I would have pulled up and changed course sooner. I've lost count of the amount of times I've gone, I wish I'd made that call a bit sooner, and changed tack. I think it comes back to deliberately creating that space. And when I sold Marybrook, I was so busy. I knew intuitively what I was going to do next was not going to be apparent until I'd actually got rid of what I was doing. There you go. So I just knew that was not going to happen. So I sold the business, and I actually took a year, but it didn't work. And I really believed that something was going to show up in that year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you got to be on the lookout. Like, it doesn't come always knocking on your door. You know, it wafts around you, and and it's people you talk to and ideas that come to your head, and for me, that's vacuum, around that vacuum, that space. And I was lucky I could spend a year doing that.
Yeah.
But you can do the same thing in a month.
Yep.
Just by slowing down and not planning a frantic family holiday where you jump from here to there to there. Like, it's something and it's not staying at home, mowing the lawns and fixing up the back shed. It's actually deliberately going to a place that's quiet and unbusied and unhurried and moving around and spending time with others in a non-time limited way. And
that's it.
Seeing what comes to you. And it looks from the outside, it looks like I come up with these spontaneous, crazy things, but it doesn't feel like that. Like, it feels like it's a progression professionally, challenge wise, remuneration wise. And it just keeps me interested, because I stopped doing the last thing because it wasn't ticking all the boxes. So, and I have this theory that, I took thousands of people abseiling, and abseiling, which is, lowering yourself backwards over a cliff, that, is a senseless, meaningless thing to do. Why would you do that? Like, there's no reason to do it. But back, when you and I were working together, Digby, that it was a thing, and that's what you did. If you're a good boss, you took your people out abseiling.
I remember I went forwards down a cliff. I got a photo of that.
Yeah, well, that's even more difficult, because you're looking at your impending doom. You're looking at when you go backwards. But you get people who come and they say, "Oh, I could never do it." And I say, "Well, how do you know you could never do it? You haven't done it before." I just know I couldn't do it. Well, you can't know you can't do it if you haven't done it before. So why don't we have a practice? Like, we'll put a harness on you and we'll clip you onto the rope, and we'll give you go practicing on the level surface many meters away from the cliff edge. And do you reckon you could do that? And they go, "Well, I suppose I could do that." Yeah. So you clip them onto the rope and they lean back in the harness. You say, "Well, look, you're already abseiling. Like, you're just on a flat surface at the moment. How does it feel? The harness is biting into your bum, and, you can feel the rope slipping through your hands. And there's, why don't we just ease our way back towards the edge of the cliff?" And okay. And if you're a good instructor, you can encourage people. They get right to the edge, and everybody knows there's a point of no return. Like, you're and you're leaning your bum over the edge, and if I go another centimetre, I'm not going to be able to come back. And, so this is the point to make your decision, because right now you have the most information about whether you can abseil or not. And if you get to that point and you go, "No, can't do it," absolutely fantastic. Like, you have now experienced abseiling. You've at that point of final commitment, you pulled back and say, "Hey, well done. You've now made a decision with all the information available." If you made a decision, 2 meters up back on the rope, you wouldn't have even known that you could have got over the edge. And I think that making life decisions is a bit similar. Like, try it on for size. Go as close to you can as you can. It might seem ridiculous and crazy, and I could never do it. And even if I could do it, it wouldn't be any fun, and I wouldn't be any good at it. And, well, maybe you would be, you've never done it before, so you don't know that. So is there a way you can try it before you buy it? Get in there and have an experience of it. And then, and you enter into it as if you're going to do it. That's the key thing. You've got to start as if you intended to complete it. Not that I'm going to taste it. I'm intending to do this, but I know I can pull out at this final point. And then you. So I've done this. I've tried stuff. I tried consulting, and I did consulting for 6 or 8 months. And because I thought that's a great way to use my accumulated experience, and there's an established path here. And I also tried to be a public speaker. I love public speaking, and I won this adventure award and great photos of me with penguins, and and I went down that path, and it didn't quite fit. So I thought, okay, and then I got invited into another company as a consultant, and ended up being the chief commercial officer for a tech company for a while, which felt great at that point in my career. But I think the point is that if you want to create and bring something interesting and different into your life, know what are the bigger pictures that you want, and create some space. And I did a lot of skydiving, and I've done like 300 odd skydive jumps, and it's incredibly thrilling and rewarding and fun, but only because you're confident your parachute's going to come out. Like, if you jump out of the plane and you're thinking, "Geez, I really don't know how well I packed that parachute," or that other bloke that packed it looked like, he was having a bad day, you're not going to enjoy the free fall. You only enjoy the free fall if you're really confident that when you're time to pull out of the free fall, you can pull your ripcord and the parachute will come out. When you're looking to make change in your life, you can only enjoy the free fall, have been committed to nothing and being in that in-between space if you're confident something's going to show up, or you're entering into this next phase as if it's going to be what you're going to do next, wholeheartedly and with full commitment. And then that free fall, that space where there's every opportunity, like the whole world could come to me right now, is exciting. It's uplifting. When you think about, I could do anything. Like, there's no limits to what I can do out here. I'm just going to wait until the right opportunity shows up.
I love this frame. You said I have a theory. I think it's borne out in my life. It's borne out in a lot of the work I do as well. I'm a huge fan of encouraging leaders, people generally, to not frame things as binary, fail or succeed, but as an experiment. It's like, let's just treat this as an experiment. You said try it on for size, right? I mean, that's another way of saying experiment with it. Try it out. See what happens when you give this a go. And it doesn't have to be a bank the farm sort of experiment. It can be let's just try it for a week and see what happens. And I remember actually, my first job was a chartered accountant, and you remember that, right? Well, you don't remember. You weren't around at the time, but I remember you couldn't believe I was a chartered accountant. It was funny when I knew I wasn't born to be a chartered accountant either, but I did it. And then I kept paying. Once I finished my chartered accounting, I went traveling around the world and did all sorts of other things, but I kept paying my fees to the Chartered Accountant Institute for 5 years. I think it was about $900 a year or something. I spent like all this money, nearly $5,000, as a backstop, because just in case I wanted to go back. And I also wanted to say I'm a chartered accountant because it had this kind of credibility sort of air about it. And at some point I realized, I think I've moved on from that. I'm not going back there, trying other things for size for 5 years. That was long enough. But then also I realized, I can just say I'm a former chartered accountant and save $900 a year. But yeah, the whole idea of we hold on to stories, don't we, about what's possible and what's not, and what's safe and what's not. And I think this idea of trying stuff on for size and being willing to, let's loop right back to earlier in the conversation, being okay with not being comfortable, right? That it's not always going to just be nice and easy and all mapped out for you, right? That we actually have to be willing to step into a space of not knowing. And let's see what will happen. Yeah.
And I bet the year, or the year decided not to pay your chartered accounting fees, was the year that all this other stuff came to you.
That was a release.
That's the way the universe works. Exactly. You're holding on to stuff. It doesn't give you what's coming next, because you're still holding on to what comes from the past. And I don't know what law of the world that is, but it's certainly been true for me that, you don't really get the new exciting chapter until you've actually really closed the last chapter, and said goodbye to it. It just won't. It won't come to you. And I made a pact with myself. I remember this, when I was at university. So, I wasn't even 20. And I said, I'm never going to make a decision in my life based upon what is more secure. So I refuse to be that person. I refuse to be someone who says that I'll make this decision because it's got more security attached to it. Because I looked around and I saw the people that actually have that as the primary driver for their decision making don't live rich and full lives. And I want to have a rich and full life. And so I think that this concept of, letting go of what you did in the past, if you're still enjoying it and it's ticking all your boxes, wonderful. But if it's not, I think you've got to be prepared to let go of what you had and make a decision which is not based upon known parameters or known income or known needs.
I love that. I love it. It's a willingness to keep upgrading your identity. Yeah. Now, there's another question that I reckon we want to explore. Tell us about religion, Maffo.
Well, we're getting into dangerous ground here, Digby. I'm happy to go there if your listeners are happy to go with us on this.
We've also always got the edit button, right? So let's see where it goes.
All right. Well, So look, I've always thought of myself as an atheist. I went to a Christian school, a really good school, private school, and I had a wonderful education. And my parents paid a lot of money for me to get all this, fine education to make me a rational thinker and an intelligent thinker and knowledgeable. And then I'd go into chapel, 3 or 4 times a week, and people stand in front of me and tell me things which I felt were clearly fairy tales. Like they just weren't true. So how is this that I was expected to suspend my rational scientific mind for the period that I went into this place called the chapel? So to me, very early on, it helped me not have a belief in the Christian religion, what the Christian religion had to offer. So I went through all my life like this. And then a couple of years ago, when we started this sailing journey, we ended up in Indonesia. And Indonesia is a deeply religious country, majority Muslim, although there are Hindu in Bali. Of course, people in Bali will know that. There are significant Christian areas as well. So it's not only Islamic. But when Indonesia was founded by Sukarno, he came up with this principle called the Pancasila, which is we will build this country on 5 principles. And one of those principles was that we will accept all religions. So a lot of people don't know that about Indonesia, that they it's part of their constitution effectively that we accept all religions. But you must have a religion. So we don't accept that you won't have a religion. So if you're an atheist, you have to keep that quiet because it's actually against the constitution not to be signed up to one of the faiths. So that's pretty interesting when you go there, and that underpins all these small villages, the lives that people lead, and even if they're not fundamental or fundamental followers of any particular faith, they have a faith, and you talk to them, and you say when you go there, the first thing you ask somebody when you see them is you say, "Oh, what's your religion?" They say, "Oh, I'm a Muslim or I'm a Christian," and in Australia, of course, and New Zealand, you don't do that. It's the last question you ask. It's very personal and could lead to judgment. So it's not politically correct to do that. But in Indonesia, it's very different. And so it underpins every conversation you have. That's how you start out. And they'll say, "Oh, what's your religion?" And they typically assume because, we're white foreigners, that we're Christian. So if I then start to say, "Oh, look, I'm atheist," they don't really know what atheist is. So I don't believe there's a greater God out there. And so, but if you communicate on that in some way, they sort of go, "Really? You look at all this beautiful world out there and you think there's nothing beyond the physical? It must be something wrong with you." So that was a really interesting experience because what I came to realize is that I do believe there's something beyond the absolute physical, and that there is something that ties together all the beauty. And we talked about my university career. I got an honours degree in agricultural science. You don't get any more fundamental in understanding evolution and natural selection than having a career in microbiology, biochemistry, genetics and breeding. I mean, this is the sort of stuff we study for 4 years. So I'm signed on scientist. I understand the world through a scientist's eyes. But what I have come to believe is that there is something beyond the physical that connects all of us. So it connects all people, all animals, all plants, and some it connects us. But what I've also come to know is that for me, that is not what other people call God, because God in the religious sense is a supernatural being, some entity that controls what we do and what we experience and created this universe and now controls it. I definitely don't believe that. So, but I do believe there's an energy there, and I think probably that makes me a pantheist. Actually,
okay.
So that's something that I'm exploring around my own personal faith, but so I distinguish faith and religion as two separate things.
Yeah.
And because religion is actually about control. Religion is actually about rules. And religion is a tribal thing. So it's about community and people that have created an identity around a tribal grouping that have a similar set of beliefs and customs. And there are some people that get a lot of comfort from that. And a lot of identity from that. But I believe that it really limits your life experience and limits your curiosity. I think there was a time in history when science was not advanced enough that we were able to understand the world around us. Whereas now, a lot of the natural world is understood and explained by science. Whereas, maybe 300-400 years ago, it wasn't. So you needed someone to explain to you why these things happened in the natural world. And, and that was, it was mystical and it was controlled by another being. So, so I don't sign up to a religion. And that's interesting also up in this part of the world because, that makes you very different to everybody else.
It's fascinating. There's a couple of things that come up to reflect on here. One is religion equals rules. I've written down, but faith equals wonder. And there's something about Julia Baird, the Australian journalist, wrote a lovely book called Phosphorescence. And it was about, I'll hash the subtitle, but it was something about things that sustain the things that sustain us when the world goes dark. And it was constant. She wrote, I think, one chapter on awe, just having awe, like being out in nature, looking up at the night sky like we would do you'd probably do this every night, Maff, on the yacht. When I'm in Nauru, there's a sense of awe and the smallness that I feel. And, it's that wonder that comes with that. It's like, how does this all work? And that's the thing you talk about, curiosity, right? That we need that in our lives. Whereas if we're just limited by here are the rules and here are the stories we have to believe, including the ones we tell ourselves, life isn't as well lived. So that's one thing that comes up. And the other one is interesting that people start a conversation not with what do you do, but what's your religion?
Yes.
And the what, and the kind of the parallel question you talked about before is, so how you going? Are you busy?
No.
It's like, that doesn't really fit. It's like, it opens up a whole new way into understanding a person, doesn't it? What's your religion? And it sounds like it helped you understand yourself more.
Well, it did. I've always understood that I didn't fit inside a religious framework, so that wasn't a particular insight. But this conversation around the faith side of it definitely provided an insight to me. And we're going through a really beautiful part of the world, like Raja Ampat in East Indonesia is probably one of the world's last paradise. It's
which is where you eloped, by the way, just listeners, right? Got married on a sandbar at low tide, but very fast rising tide.
Yeah,
it was a quick wedding.
It was a quick wedding, and there's the interesting tie in here that my wife Donna, she is quite religious. She is brought up as a fundamental Christian, and so she was very keen that we get married by a pastor. And so under the eyes of God. So I said, well, look, I can do this. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's not, but if it's important to you, we can do this. But so it took us a long time to find a pastor because they don't do this. Like they don't marry people that just rock up and say, we want to get married. They've got to know them for a year and know the families are compatible and all of this sort of thing. But anyway, we found this guy, Rudolph, and he was prepared to do it. And he'd never married foreigners before. And so anyway, spoke to Donna and Donna talked about her faith and pull out your Bible and I don't have my Bible and he said, oh well, you must have it on your phone. Oh, I don't have it on my phone. And anyway, so they talked about Donna's faith and the fact she's a bit of a backslider. And then he looked at me and said, Andrew, what is your faith? And Donna and I had anticipated this question. And so I said, well, Rudolph, I'm a pantheist. And he said, what does that mean? And I said, well, I sort of believe there's a God all around us, and I believe in all religions. God is kicking me under the table, saying, oh, this is not the right thing to say. Anyway, full credit to Rudolph that he actually did agree to marry us because he said, Andrew, I think you can be a better – I said, I can be a better man. Then he said, well, I think you can be saved. So he was happy to marry us. And it took him 2 days to get out in the speedboat to where we were getting married, and he came out in his – shiny shoes and his suit. And I said, oh, you must have missed the memo, Rudolph. We're on a sandspit, mate. He was very good. And the reason why, we all got wet trouser legs is because he went off script and ended up going on a bit longer than we thought he would. The tide did come up, and by the time we left the sandspit, there was no sand there.
Oh, gold. Oh, that's good. So religion does have its uses, Maff. You got married. Yeah. It was a beautiful ceremony. Saw the photos. Yeah. Look, I reckon we might want to loop back into this podcast is called Dig Deeper, and we've gone deep in so many ways in this conversation, like we always do when we talk. Our campfire conversations at Nauru, long drives, all sorts of stuff. Right. The question I'd love to finish with is just to invite you to reflect on what have you learned through this conversation about digging deep? Like, what's come up for you that maybe wasn't apparent before?
Okay. Well, look, I think that it's maybe it's rather than a new insight, maybe it's a reinforcing of something which I know deep down. And for me, curiosity is everything. So curiosity throws a light on the world. And without curiosity, you can't learn and grow. You can't learn from the experience of others. And I think that this podcast, is perhaps about fertilizing curiosity, or sharing experience. That I think if you are curious, if you are happy to stop, be quiet and listen to others, or listen to the world, or listen to your faith, or whatever it might be, if you still yourself enough to receive, then you can grow. You can become a better person. You can achieve transitions in your life by being open-minded. And I think that if you have this, I have a real need to understand how things work. Mm. So, right next to me on this boat, I've got a diesel engine that sometimes is a mystery to me. But the more I can understand how it works, the more able I am to maintain it, because there's no one else up here that's going to maintain it. And I'm not a mechanic. I'm an agricultural scientist. I'm a farmer's son. But I need to be able to fix that thing. So I need to be curious about how it works. If you understand something that you're required to manage, you can manipulate your own approach to get the outcome you want. If you're a farmer, you need to understand how the natural systems of the world work. So you know when to plant your crops, when you know to put the ram out with the sheep. You need to understand that natural system. If you're a people manager, you need to understand human behavior. And you need to be deeply interested in human behavior, and beyond what people's work behaviour is, because then you can understand how to get the best out of those people and how to support them and help them achieve their own life goals, because then they'll become better people, and that's what leadership is about. So I think that curiosity is everything, and I think that by sharing our experiences and by listening openly to how someone who might have had a different career roles but might have had similar experiences, we can learn from, and we can adapt that experience to be more fulfilled ourselves, and to be a better leader and manager for the people who rely upon us. Because the thing about my busy work life is that yes, it's goal driven around KPIs and targets and revenues and things like that, but I always told my managers, I said, the most important thing here is how we manage our people, and providing an opportunity for those people to go on and do bigger and better things, either under our own tutelage or in some other role or some other organisation or other career direction. Because when we're finished our professional work lives, we won't look back and remember the revenue targets we achieved, but what we will remember is the people who work for us and where they went to after they worked for us, and what they stepped onto. That's the really important thing, and I reflect upon that. It's just hugely enriching, diggers, to be sitting here, on other sides of the world, talking to each other about our life lessons. When you and I met in that exact environment, you came and worked with me for a short period, a year or two, and then I used that as a springboard to go on and work in different directions. And I won't take responsibility for the fact you've been really successful in what you've done, but if I gave you some experiences, or if I didn't give them to you, but in your time with me, you got some of those experiences that helped you move on to live a fulfilling life. That's the most rewarding thing that you'll ever have as a people manager.
Maffett, you've certainly been a major catalyst in my life coming out of that burnout period that I mentioned. You were someone who pulled me out of quite a dark hole without you even knowing it. And the way in which your values that are becoming really apparent now in this conversation around wanting to contribute to someone else's trajectory. That's what happened for me. So yeah, publicly, thank you, mate. And your talk about accelerating wisdom, curiosity of everything, the way in which you describe the power of curiosity, I reckon that's something for all of us to sit with and reflect on. And the allowing the space and having the courage to create the space to not know and to listen and to see what's there that we hadn't seen before. You know, you're in the perfect environment to do it, but I think it's something that we can do that in any environment if we find structures, people, and courage to help us do it. So, mate, awesome. So thank you. Yeah, you have a fascinating life, and some of us online. Where can people find you if they wanted just to follow you and learn a bit more about what you're doing these days?
Well, I love photos. So I love taking photos. I love looking at photos. I love editing photos. I just think they're wonderful. Not just, you know, holiday snaps, which are lovely memories, but I love, you know, the artistry of photos. So I try and take photos most days, and if I get good photos, I post them on Instagram. So it's not a day-to-day account of what we do, but it's you know, regular images of some of the beautiful places and
beautiful
people we
stuff.
See. So yeah, Digby, you're very welcome to share that. I think you know that what that Instagram handle is. So chasing horizons, chasing._horizons. But have a look at some of the beautiful places we go to, because the world is a seriously beautiful place. And it's not just the natural beauty, but the people as well. And I try and capture some of that as well.
I reckon that's a perfect place to end. The world is a beautiful place. Yeah. Maffett, thanks so much. It's been so rich, so fascinating to connect with you again, mate. We'll see you again soon.
It's been a pleasure, Diggs. Cheers.
After that conversation with Maffett, my brain is bouncing all over the place. I really admire how he has deliberately learned the art and craft of creating space and how rare that is. That reflection on how rare that is in our day-to-day Western world. And the power of space, the power of uncommitted time, as I like to call it, where by just allowing counterintuitively the space to not know and to notice what's there, what's there waiting to be seen. And if we want to make change happen, it's an essential discipline. It's less about Gantt charts and plans and details. It's more about stopping first and going, let's just stop and let go and see what's there. Let the snow globe settle. And then perhaps experiment with some new ways, but don't necessarily lock on. I love that discipline as well. It kind of goes against a lot of the busyness. We've got to keep charging forward. Well, maybe not. Maybe we need to have a different sort of rhythm, which is a time for on and a time for off, and a time for new ideas and a time for applying ideas. There's some things that have got me thinking. I wonder about what it's got you thinking and what you might do. What's one small thing you could do right now? Maybe it's asking a different question. Maybe it's trying a new experiment with some of the ideas that have come up. I'd love you to try something. I'd also love it if you like this episode, then share it with one other person, someone that you reckon would get some value from this. I'd love it if you liked it, then like it in your app too, and perhaps subscribe so you can get more of the episodes coming through. Until next time, go well.